This podcast is funded by Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of the acclaimed film Most Likely to Succeed, and the author of the best-selling book What School Could Be.
A good teacher really knows that the education really comes from within the child. It's not what you funnel into the child, it's that wonder that's within the child. And that knowledge is actually kind of there. It's in their DNA. It unleashes in them, the students, the ability to be that sponge and the ability to take this spirit from within themselves and to utilize it by taking all these resources around them. So it's really a gift of learning, of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and converting that into real community wellness and prosperity.
Hey everybody, this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast. I am your host, Josh Rapun. This series is committed to giving full voice to innovative, creative, and imaginative educators and education leaders across the Hawaiian Islands. You can find them on Kauai, on Maui, on Molokai, and Lanai, on Oahu and Hawaii Island. Our goal is 1,000 points of light, and as we cross over 27,000 downloads to date, the wind is fully in our sails, and we are firmly fixed on that North Star that is student-driven learning. Speaking of 1,000 points of light, my guest today is Dr. Tammy Jones. Dr. Jones is a project coordinator for Places Hawaii at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, supporting teachers on the Waianae Coast to develop place-based curricula. She is also the curriculum developer and co-facilitator of TryThink, a program run in the state correctional facilities and sponsored by the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. Dr. Jones spent the first 12 years of her career in education as an English teacher in both public and charter school settings. She earned her master's in teaching in 2005 and her PhD in curriculum studies in 2012, both from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Dr. Jones has worked closely with Dr. Thomas Jackson and the Uehiro Academy for Philosophy and Ethics in Education to promote Philosophy for Children Hawaii, known as P4C. Fred Rapun, my nephew, and the education coordinator for the He'ia National Estuarine Research Preserve, said the following about Dr. Jones. We worked together for Places in 2017 and helped to send 3 teams from Nanakuli High School to the science fair. Tammy has an amazing commitment and set of tools that she uses to elevate student voice and action at every scale, from daily conversations to classroom to school to community. Thanks to her, the Nanakuli student science projects were actually about them finding their confidence as thinkers and communicators. And now, here's my conversation with Dr. Tammy Jones. Tammy, welcome to the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast.
Hey, thanks, Josh. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, so thanks for extending the invite.
Yes, mutual. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Awesome.
So, Tammy, at the risk of losing our listeners right out of the gate, I want to ask you about a concept called teacher efficacy, inspired by an article we both read titled The Past and Future of Teacher Efficacy at ASCD by Thomas Guskey. I'm going to read a quote. So, quote, in particular, we must try to create situations where teachers can realize their actions have an important positive influence on their students' learning. Instead of trying to change teachers' attitudes and beliefs directly, we must change the experiences that shape those attitudes and beliefs. Specifically, we must provide teachers with mastery experiences, unquote. In other words, we will see teacher efficacy, which the dictionary defines as the ability to produce a desired or intended result, when teachers don't just believe they can make a difference, but see real evidence they are making a difference. So you've been in the front row of this conversation, Tammy, and I would love to hear an example or two of when you more than just believed in your efficacy, your ability to make change, but saw the evidence as if you were an eyewitness.
I think teacher efficacy is a really complex idea because, you need to develop the confidence. In order to do that, though, you first have to try
Right.
and sometimes fail. And then, the confidence is lost to try again. And so confidence is a big part of that. You have to believe that what you're doing works and what you're doing has an impact. And just after that quote you read, the author mentions having to, teachers need specific and regular feedback, right, on how their actions are affecting their students. And when I read that, I was thinking, that feedback should come from the students. And so with your question about maybe an example or two, I think in general, when I provided opportunities for students to give me the feedback in terms of demonstrating what they learned. So, for example, if we were analyzing a text, I was an English teacher. Whenever I was able to step away and the inquiry or the discussion, the analysis continued without me, that was when I was able to have that confidence that, okay, they can learn without me. I can be, on the side, an observer to the learning. And so I think in general, whenever that happened in my classroom, we got to that point, which doesn't happen right away, but when you get to that point where the students can be independent and doing the skills that you've been practicing, then that was points in my career where I felt like, okay, what I'm doing works, what I'm doing has an impact. So, I think anytime that students can give that direct feedback, they're sort of like our client, right? And so when they give the feedback that they get it, it works, then that I think is the most regular and specific, rather than an outside person observing and saying, yes, what you're doing is having an impact. But, more specifically, the first example that always comes to mind when I think about this type of question or when I saw the biggest change in what was happening in my classroom to know that this, it was worth the risk was something I always refer to as the intervention. I believe, learning can't happen if any child in the classroom doesn't feel safe, sharing, asking a question, et cetera. And so once there's something stopping students from doing that, then you have to pause and look at the community. And so there was a point where learning wasn't happening in my classroom and I couldn't figure out why. And there was, bullying and intimidation. And so I did, what I call the intervention. And I used that community to correct itself. So I posed some questions to my students, all of them anonymously. They wrote how they feel in that classroom, the reasons why they felt safe or unsafe. And then the following day, I shared those back, without any judgment, without coming from me, just sharing the words of the community back on the community. And it corrected itself. And then we could continue. And so I think, that would be the biggest moment in my career where I was able to step back and just believe that this community, when given the time to reflect and share and a space to do so in a safe way, would correct itself. And I think that was a huge impact on my belief and my confidence in what was happening.
What I love about this is that, and what you're describing here is, for so many years, we gathered input from students using year-end evaluations or forms or, things like that. And what you're describing is entirely different. What you're describing is not them, coming to you and saying, Ms. Jones, here's what I'm thinking or here's what I'm experiencing. What they're doing is exercising their voices and their skills and their abilities right in front of you. And that in itself is a feedback to you, right?
Right. And, I think that's more powerful coming from the students. Again, more terrifying sometimes
right.
or risky.
Yeah.
But if it's provided in the right, format, a way that they feel that what they're going to say actually matters and will impact what happens in the classroom or, and it could be with content as well. Maybe they share that they're not being challenged enough, or maybe they share that they're a little lost, but giving them a proper space to do that will show the impact, I think, greater than someone providing outside feedback or someone who doesn't know the students as well as you do. Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, so I think, teacher efficacy is such a complex thing, right? Because it's not something you just have.
Yeah.
And it's hard to develop if you're not feeling comfortable, especially early in your career, to develop without proper supports. And, you need some ideas and some people guiding you. But in the end, I think it's really what the students are showing you, telling you. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially if the feedback coming in, as you described earlier, is, indicating that maybe things are not working in some way, it's most important that you have colleagues that you can turn to, who can coach, who can listen, and that you have a sort of support network as you receive that feedback and try to figure out what it actually means. So you're right. It is a really complex topic, and but something that I'm super interested in, and I'm hoping to continue to ask guests on this podcast as we go forward about what they think about it. So that's very cool. So Tammy, way back when I spoke to an individual doing pretty heroic work in Hawaii to help reimagine public education, he talked about the quote, 51 mandates sitting on teachers' shoulders. This was a few years ago, which crushed the life out of them and prevent them from working towards teacher efficacy. And he literally meant 51 mandates. Like, he counted them up and there were 51 of them. I was just amazed. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are some things teachers are mandated to do that maybe we should remove or set aside? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think, the obvious one is testing. In the high school grades where I was, there's only 1 year of that, state test, but still there's that requirement, and not to teach to the test, but that's a thing. Kids have to take it. School, certain things about the school rely on it. It's going to be reported to the public how well we did. So there's a lot of stress. I think that's the first one. I think there's different mandates probably in the lower elementary area that I'm not as familiar with, but I know getting kids to pass is sometimes more on the teacher. I hate to say, but proving that you did anything and everything to get that student through. And maybe that's not verbalized as much, but it is an expectation that, well, did you do everything to get them to that graduation line? And that's a lot of pressure on teachers. I think some of the things, another obvious thing, is standards. I do believe there should be, some standardized education, but to say, everybody's teaching this thing on this day or these particular standards in this order really limits teachers, limits the profession. I moved to a charter school environment. I felt that more. I was trusted as a professional that I am to teach what I believe the students needed to learn, when they needed to learn it, and how. And that was very limiting in the traditional K-12 classroom, a little bit more mandated to follow, a certain, let's say, curriculum map, right? And again, not that I don't believe in those things, but when you're mandated, it's handed to you. Here's what you're teaching in this order. Go for it. Back to that first question, it's really hard to develop your confidence and skill set as a teacher.
And your efficacy as a teacher as well.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. And it's also limiting on time. I mean, every time that you add a mandate, that means time is taken to work on whatever that mandate is. And time is taken away from something that you might want to be doing to develop yourself as a teacher or to develop your classroom as that, you described a minute ago, that starting with that safe place that kids can come and then begin to learn, right?
Yeah. And mandates are often, a blanket thing. Everyone does it, right? And so it's not specific to your students' individual needs. And again, your students best, you spend that time with them.
Yeah.
And so I think mandates that are, not flexible in any way, or just everyone, no exception, things like that, I think, need to be changed, and more trust on the professional that is, leading the classroom and guiding those students to that end goal.
Right. So Tammy, let's dive into, speaking of something that's like super positive, let's dive into places, which when I dug into it as part of my prep really blew my mind. I have several questions in this section about places. So you are one of 4 project coordinators for Places, which is grounded on the leeward coast of Oahu in the Waianae community. What is your elevator, in a nutshell, description of Places?
It's funny, we always ask ourselves that question. It's hard to describe what we do. Basically, we connect classroom to community. So working as, I guess, like a liaison between the two, oftentimes teachers don't know how to reach out to community members or community members, right? They may not work in the community they live in. And community members often don't know how to get into the classrooms or, offer opportunities to teachers. And so we provide place-based learning experiences for students in the K-12 environment in the Waianae Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's the pitch, the elevator speech. Yeah.
Right. And what I've experienced over 6 years of doing this most likely to succeed in what school could be work here in Hawaii is you are right. There are lots of teachers who don't have any connection to the community or don't really know how to reach out to community. And then there's like hundreds of educators out there who have made that leap. They have started to develop relationships with organizations or projects in the community. And it's just fascinating to see how that's happened. It's just like any process of building a relationship. You have to reach out, you have to get to know, you have to listen, and all of those kinds of things. And it sounds like Places helps educators actually start that process. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, our job relies on relationships. I have to build those relationships with teachers as well as the community members. And it's funny, I'm one of those teachers who worked in a community I didn't live in. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have those close ties in that community to reach out to provide experiences for my students. Now I realize how valuable that is. Yeah. And I actually, I often laugh at how connected I am to the Waianae Coast, and I don't live there. Yeah. I live, I've never lived out that way, but I have such a network out there of both community partners and teachers, and it comes through the relationship in the work we do. And that is 100%, what it depends on. And then of course the students building relationships with those people and places that they get to go to that are in their own backyard, literally, but they don't know about, they don't have that experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. So while reading the Places origin story on the front page of its awesome website, I was stopped in my tracks, Tammy, by this quote. So quote, "So together we all explored and learned of the incredible depth and wealth of cultural capital, intellectual capital, and spiritual capital. The more students were able to access this capital, the more curious, engaged, and positive they grew," end quote. So I wonder if you can explain the relationship described in this quote between access to capital and emergent curiosity and engagement.
So we see students that when they have access to something new, different than what they're used to, they become more curious, right? And so that idea of this emerging curiosity and wonder and inquiry comes from something new. Mm-hmm. And so we see every time over these years when we get students out to learn about, let's say, the capital of their community, they are more interested in connecting that to the subject areas they're learning, right? And so when they are at the farm working alongside, partners who went to the same high school they did, who live up the street from them, who know the same spots in their community, then they're opening up to that relationship. They're starting to wonder more about that place, how this person got there, what do they do? Their wonder guides the learning. And that's what we want. The students are then able to direct their own learning, of course, still with some guidance by the teacher to get them through what they need to learn. Let's say, it's still perhaps a science class, but let's have the students direct how they want to learn that. We definitely believe that the Waianae Coast is so rich in these opportunities for kids and have, so much respect for all the partners that do provide this sort of capital for the kids to come and learn alongside of them. And then it becomes this mutually beneficial relationship and learning experience.
And I love the idea that we assume that the kids have this core capital, which is their desire to inquire, to wonder, to learn. Right. And when you start from that place, then it's just a process of figuring out where all the other types of capital exist and then connecting them in that way, right? So that's super cool. So Dr. Kei Fukuda, who is the Places project director, talks about the authentic connection between what students are learning in their classes and what that means in their community. So I want to provide our listeners a concrete example of a place-based project.
Places is place-based learning and community engagement in school. Students need to know where they come from and where they live. And they need to understand the strengths within their community, and there are a lot of them. And that needs to be part of their education. And that's what Places tries to do. It's always understanding the historic, contextualizing it within the present in order to prepare the students to be the stewards of the future.
The Places website talks about presenting a water resolution at the annual Native Hawaiian Civic Club conference. So tell me, what was this about and what happened during the student presentation?
This project is super close to my heart. I got to work on it. My first year coming to Places was 2016 to 2017 school year, and that's when this project took place. These students were seniors in a credit recovery program at Nanakuli High School, and they're together all day, every day, and rightfully so. Their teachers wanted to provide them with another experience, outside learning experience. So we went once a week to Ka'ala Farm. And I always think back in the first day that we went and we took the kids on a hike up to the water source. And
Wow.
They learned a little bit about the history of water. And it's not a huge hike. It's a mile up and back. But man, did they complain the whole way up and
I
back.
can only imagine.
Yeah, especially, first day up there, August, it's hot in Waianae. And so hiking up, learning the history, hiking back down, and then we take out PVC pipe. And, that's how the water is brought down actually to this farm from the stream, the mile up, PVC pipe to roll it down into the lo'i terraces, right? And so we have these students help do that. And again, man, they're complaining and this is manual labor and, child labor and all this stuff. And it's funny, and I tell that because you fast forward to what you just mentioned, that conference we took them to where they were so passionate about fighting for the right to have water on that farm. And it shows you that, if we started with, hey, we're going to learn how to write a resolution and we're going to go to neighborhood board meetings and we're going to go to civic clubs, that's stomping out that curiosity. It's telling them, right? Instead, it was, let's go explore. Let's see what's happening in this farm in our community. Let's learn about the history. And once they became connected to that place and the people there, they just wanted to work hard. They wanted to fight for it. So, they had to be presented with this opportunity in a way that they could access it. So, it's in my neighborhood. Wow, there's this farm and there's this amazing person, Eric Enos, who's been fighting for water. And that's crazy. Why does he have to fight for water? And then when they're working in the lo'i and they're seeing how important that is. And through that experience, then they became passionate, right? We didn't intend to write a resolution. And then again, that was an opportunity that came up, and they, as a collective group, wrote the resolution. A handful of them went to different neighborhood boards and civic clubs and presented it. And cut to a year later, it was the fall of 2017. So actually they had graduated, and two of them came back and we took them to that conference, and they just blew everyone away.
Whereas the meaning of Waianae is fresh water mullet, and whereas Waianae Valley traditionally was known as the food basket.
And whereas according to the Board of Water Supply current data, 1.4 million gallons of water flows from Kanish Tunnel per day.
Whereas water is life and was like blood for Hawaiians, without blood in your body you cannot survive. And whereas the entire Waianae Valley without water cannot survive.
To see these youth come up, and it was a very interesting hearing. It didn't pass that first year. It took us another year to get it passed. But, so many people were just fascinated by these youth who were there on behalf of this organization, this farm, this important place in their community. And they were fighting for what it deserved, and following along in the footsteps of Eric Enos and the Ka'ala Farm team to do that. And, again, unfortunately, it didn't pass that year, but it did later. And it just is a legacy, that they have left. Yeah.
And the fact that it didn't pass the first year in and of itself is a powerful lesson. That's everybody has to go through multiple iterations of things that they want to get done. I mean, this is about efficacy again, right? They're
Right.
learning the process of what it means to bring change into the community that they live in. And the fact that it didn't pass is going to be, a great moment for them to go in and reflect on what did we do and what did we not do and what did we have to do again. So that's very cool. So kind of along the same lines, And I could literally ask you hundreds of questions about places and place-based learning, but we're limited by time. At the Places site, I found the following descriptor, and I'm going to read it all the way through. So, quote, multiple literacies. Children encounter many opportunities to acquire various literacies through projects, whether it is researching mo'olelo, which is storytelling, writing and filming public service announcements, or creating procedural manuals or constructing worm bins. Literacy is acquired and practiced in authentic contexts. So, Tammy, in a previous episode, I spoke to a remarkable elementary school administrator at Mid-Pacific Institute at Nahasi about the idea of not forcing kids to read too early, but giving them opportunities to, quote, read the world. So multiple literacy sounds very similar and very powerful. What is the power in training for multiple literacies? In other words, it's one thing for an education geek like me to get amped up on the idea, but let's be sure everyone listening understands what we're talking about, right? So multiple literacies.
Right. Read the world. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, just using that last example of those students in the AALI program, they were reading the environment they were getting to go to each week. They were learning about the history, like you said, mo'olelo from listening. They had to build up their capacity to sit and listen to stories and understand how powerful it was to be gifted with that story from the people of that place. They learned the cultural practices by doing, right? Learning by doing is, we all know, in the education realm, you always hear that, if you can do it yourself, if you can teach someone else, it's the level to which you've retained that knowledge.
Something that was important to me was the experience in this class, learning new things.
This program, Li'i, is Kahala Farm.
And this program is that working with everybody.
The teamwork we did.
The name in general, Li'i, which is resilience.
Everybody worked as a team. We never gave up. The classmates I've been with through this whole year.
The thing I will miss about this program is Laulimo, working hard with our hands.
One thing I will remember about Li'i is we work as a family. We never do give up. We always have a smile on our face. When anybody's down, we always come there and help them out. It's like basically we is family.
Program would probably be the teamwork I experienced. Last year I didn't really have a lot of friends or anything.
Everything I went through, everything I experienced, to be honest, if it wasn't for it, I wouldn't be here right now, be the person I am today.
Before I never did wanted to do work, before I never did wanted to come outside, being in a hot sun. I like learning new things because instead of being in a classroom, just talking about it, I want to be in the classroom and just do it.
And so when they learn, for example, to make a rock wall or to clear and patch a lo'i, they were learning by doing. And that literacy is just knowing the right thing to do when you see it, when you feel it, right? There's not like a set step or procedure necessarily to patch a lo'i. But you see that it needs it because you're doing like kilo, right? You're observing, you're seeing that the water is or is not moving. You're seeing that the kalo is maybe not thriving. So a lot of the observation, we do bring in kilo practices a lot to these projects. And so being able to read what's around them and getting to that place where they realize how important this water resolution was, right? So after a whole year of hearing the history, seeing the need, actually putting their hands and feet and sometimes their whole bodies in the water, then it became real for them. And it was a part of them. I know in that resolution, they make that comment about restoring life, right? Water is life. And so they really internalized the need for this. And so I would say they had these multiple literacies of just Ka'ala Farm, but it provided such a diverse experience for them. And that is a goal with all of these projects we do. Some places is a during the school day program. So these projects are meant to enhance their curriculum, what they're learning. And then our after school program is also place connection, but, a little bit more freedom since it's after school. But the idea always remains, to get them to learn new things about something maybe they think they already know, right? Or something they haven't experienced before as well.
Tammy, I got total goosebumps, chicken skin, as we say in Hawaii, when I was listening to the young man reading the resolution to the Hawaiian Civic Club. And he was going through the cadence of whereas and whereas and whereas, and the degree to which he understood that he was laying out a series of assumptions that everyone in the room had to make as they moved towards the actual text of the resolution was incredible.
Therefore, be it so resolved that the 1.4 million gallon of water that is being diverted out of this Kunish tunnel be released back into the streams. Be it further resolved that releasing the water back to the stream would be like the blood flowing through our veins, giving us back life.
And I think that what you're describing here, what you've just described, is really the process of where you read the world, where you gain those multiple literacies, and then they result in something that's very kind of dramatic in a moment. It's a leap forward in your own ability to kind of make your point, to bring your voice right to the table. And I'm wondering if you saw that moment kind of in the same way that I did.
Oh yeah, I've seen those videos. There's a few of them, right? And I get choked up every time, and especially because he gets choked up when he's reading it. You know, there's a little thing in his throat there, and also knowing him. Mm-hmm. And knowing how that is an experience. If I had showed him that video a year or 2 years prior, he wouldn't have believed that was him, right? And probably his teachers wouldn't have either. But, you see, and again, I said these kids are in credit recovery and struggling to graduate. And then you look and it's like, man, you went beyond just meet the credits, you went beyond just get to the graduation ceremony. They did something big for their community. And I get choked up every time. And I've seen it probably 24 times. Yeah.
Yeah. He became a citizen of the community in that moment. It was marvelous to watch that happen. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, hey, everyone, stay with us. After this short break, we will continue our conversation with Dr. Tammy Jones.
Hi, friends. Toy Hirschman here from the Entre Ed Talk podcast. I am super excited to support the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast hosted by none other than the amazing Josh Rapoon. And I also want to give a big shout out to all of the incredible educators in Hawaii who are doing unreal things in the entrepreneurship and design-based thinking spaces. I hope you all subscribe and listen to What School Could Be in Hawaii. And also, hey, why not check out the Entre Ed Talk podcast, where we interview stellar entrepreneurial educators and entrepreneurs from across the country and globe. I cannot wait to connect with you.
Aloha, my name is Aaron Shorn, a previous guest on this very podcast. I am also now head of growth and community at Hawaii's own Unruler. Unruler is a collaborative mobile and web platform that accelerates innovation, grows culture and community, and celebrates learning. Learners post multimedia, tag their learning, and through comments are able to work together asynchronously. Each post is a moment of learning that forms the foundation of a joyous learning journey. We can be found at unrulr.com. Mahalo.
Hey everyone, this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, and we're back with Dr. Tammy Jones, a project coordinator for Places Hawaii, which supports teachers on the Waianae Coast developing place-based curriculum. So Tammy, in this section, I want to focus on Eye to Eye, which is your passion project and the reason why I had the idea to have you on this podcast in the first place. So though not relevant to future listeners, you have a workshop on Eye to Eye coming up in December of 2021 at the Hanahauali Professional Development Center, which is absolutely fantastic. So what is the derivation of Eye to Eye? What is its origin story, and what is its vision and mission?
I think it's the application of the evolution of myself from, I was thinking about this as a classroom teacher, working directly with students, to now working alongside students and teachers together more than I ever did when I was in the classroom, and to even rolling out a little bit further to working with adults in some different capacities that I've been able to. And with all of that, I always value the importance of having this community, this network, and reflecting back on that first question, when you said about my own efficacy, I was thinking, what made me feel that I had the confidence to try some of these things, especially being the largest high school in the state and the only one trying some of the things I was doing with philosophy for children. But I just did. And I was thinking what made me take that chance, that risk. And it was the network I had. It was the support. I was in a cohort program that provided me with colleagues doing the same thing, but maybe at different schools, different grades. But we could come together in a safe place and talk about our frustrations, our successes, exchange ideas, brainstorm. And that was, outside of the school setting with my same, teachers. And so I realized, especially working alongside adults now, we all need that. A lot of teachers still need to have this safe network to do that with, to celebrate, to sort of share struggles, to support. And sadly, it really doesn't exist. And so I think the push for me was when we got to, 2020 and the pandemic hit, and suddenly everybody was needing support in a variety of ways. But teachers were really reaching out to us with my Places team for ideas. How can we engage the students and just their own frustrations, and sharing how they didn't have time for things right now because they just had to make this pivot. They had to drop other projects to make this pivot, and they were struggling. And I was thinking, man, wouldn't it be great to have this place of people who can understand, because they're also teachers, but it's not just a venting session. It's not just all of us were in the same boat and let's just complain or share struggles in this boat, but other people that might help to get us out of that situation, to provide support or ideas, or, hey, this is what we're doing over here, why don't you try that? And getting a broader range of perspectives. And so that's sort of how it came. Also, myself having some downtime during this pandemic. We work with teachers, and suddenly teachers aren't on school. So I had some downtime myself, and I really got to map this idea out, this eye to eye project, which is just that. It's providing a safe space for teachers to exchange their ideas, to give support, to receive support, to ask questions, to learn some strategies, mainly with philosophy for children, P4C, which is at the core of who I am as an educator. And so sharing some of that, and just to connect, and I think connection is a basic human need, and education can be a very isolating profession. You go to your classroom, you do your thing, and that's it.
Right.
And so, I just want to provide spaces for teachers to come to have these discussions that they come with, so the idea of I come with my ideas and my struggles, my success, my challenge, just my support. And I leave that with some affirmation to continue going, to step ahead. And so that's where the name comes from as well. The I, myself, I come to this space and I leave with this affirmation, this yes in Hawaiian, I, to continue going. And I realize now that it's how I entered the profession. I'm extremely lucky that I entered education, like I said, in a cohort. And so that was built in. I was lucky to have that built into my experience, and that's not true with all educators. So
yeah. Wow, I think you've definitely laid an idea on the table here, which is let's make sure that educators enter the profession in a cohort and not alone, right? Yeah. And thank you for providing the denotation and the connotation of eye to eye. I wanted to make sure that people understood what its origin story is. So Your workshop will focus on two essential questions. How might we build community in uncertain times and spaces? And how might we as educators support one another in doing so? So before I have you answer those two questions, I know that you probably figured that was what was going to happen. I want to ask a process question. What was your process, your journey to eye, to these two beautiful, essential questions? Like, allow us, Tammy, a window into the life of a person designing a passion project, like lots of cups of tea, late nights reading stuff, talking to colleagues, going for long hikes where you can think and scheme. Like, what do we see if we look in that window of you coming to this place that is eye to eye?
None of those things, which is funny. I'm like, wow, you make it sound so much more beautiful than what actually happened. I think it's honestly the evolution of those 12 years as a teacher
Mm-hmm.
and continuing to value the establishment of community. I put that first priority in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving into the next phase of my career, I'd say, and continuing to have opportunities working with places and working with other groups of adults, seeing that community is still so important. And so just always holding that as a core belief. We have to be able to establish a sense of community in order to learn, grow, have a relationship. And so that first question, how might we build community in uncertain times and spaces? It's not something I have an answer for. It's something that we will discuss and think through together. Like, how can we do that? How are you doing that? How's it going? Are you still struggling? We are sort of, I hate to use the word normal, but coming back to normal in terms of kids are at school, every day in most cases, but it's still uncertain. Kids are coming back after being away for so long. And so how do we get back to community and trusting this experience, trusting that, it's safe here when it is such an uncertain time? Yeah, it's really just, if you just looked into the window, as you said, I think you would just see that that's always been something I've held at my core, is establishing community. And you can't just say, okay, we're a community and poof, you're a community, right? It has to be in the experiences you provide, the language you use. I want to ask educators, how can we do that? How are you doing that? And if no one is or has any idea, we'll get there through a conversation. Is that something we all value?
I have this image in my mind, of the proverbial Amish barn raising, with everyone's hands on the wood as they move the walls from flat to upright. And when you're talking about building community, most people build with other people. It's hard to build something by yourself. I mean, I know it can be done, but and especially in these uncertain times when you're using maybe technologies for building that you've never used before. Look at the extent to which people had to learn how to communicate with each other during the pandemic using things like Google Meet, which is what we're using today, or Zoom, or any of the other technologies. And how do you exist in those spaces but continue to build things together? And it sounds like this has all been on your mind as you've had what you described as a bit of downtime to really think through what this would be about. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, totally. And I think an unexpected experience that I had is teaching in the correctional facility. And I think that might have been the final sort of push over into following through on this idea I've been kicking around in my head, because that is an always uncertain time and space.
Yep.
And it is not a space that values community in the sense of we need to establish it, right? It's not something that the, let's say, administration puts forth and wants to establish among the men and women. It's not a space where you're asked, what do you think? What are you wondering about? It's the complete opposite of what I would hope to create in a classroom. And so when my partner and I have been doing that for 4 years. And then again, with the pandemic, that stopped, knowing that the men and women valued that so much. They needed that safe community, that space to think, to talk, to support, to cry. And then it was gone in a second for a year and a half. Really sort of, I think, was kind of the thing that pushed me into like, okay, this isn't just what students need. This isn't just what teachers necessarily need. It's really what adults need in this time, is these places to come and talk and share. But, my focus being in education, I really want to have that for teachers.
Right. Back in 1999, when I was getting my master's at University of Hawaii at Manoa in the College of Education, my master's was in educational foundations. I was actually on a contract with an office of the governor of Hawaii called State Volunteer Services, and we were working with the corrections facility to try to develop opportunities for inmates who qualified to actually do volunteer work to come out into the community and to give back to the community. And I'm just thinking about what you just described and how there are these steps to re-entering and being part of the community. And what you're referencing, if I'm correct, is try think, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And that's just, it feels right. It feels pono. It feels holistic and organic, but always with an eye to the realities of what, the uncertain realities of being incarcerated. And So that's really interesting that you're doing that. So kind of along the same lines and continuing with Eye to Eye, I'm a daydreamer, Tammy, and I do a lot of daydreaming. I often daydream while I'm swimming, which is a little bit dangerous, but I try to bring things into reality through my daydreaming. So let's give you an opportunity to daydream right now, and let's imagine your passion project is successful in the months and years to come. For the child in an elementary or middle or high school classroom setting, whatever the learning setting is, how might life change because the quote teacher is infused with the concept of eye to eye because of the work that you're doing?
Oh, I love it. Yes, I think, teachers have to have the experience, whatever that is, firsthand and feel the value of it, the impact of it, to then want it for their students. And so my hope would be that, in the months and years down the line, when Eye to Eye is more than just me doing this work with teachers, that teachers are having these experiences that they value with one another. They're valuing that importance of establishing a community and using that community to gain perspectives, right? To try things out. And you know what? Even to develop that efficacy, that safe space to try, to get some feedback, right? And then it carries into their classroom. So sort of their lived experience, they want that for their students, and they know how to provide that because they've done it. In the future, I think how students would benefit from this is that they come to school feeling that they are a part of a community. They are part of something. Their contribution matters. Their wondering is valued, their questions, their voice. And teachers are empowered to move beyond those mandates. They are empowered to, find a place for them. It's true. It's, part of the profession, but in a way that values this community. We're a co-learner in it. We are doing this together. Yeah, that would be great.
So you've inspired me. One more question before we take another break. You've inspired me to go back to something we were talking about earlier, which is the multiple literacies. So again, kind of in the daydreaming mode, we all wonder what happens to our students as they move on with their lives after school. You've been describing how Eye to Eye ultimately might have an influence on their lives in school, quote unquote. If you were daydreaming about kids really skilled in multiple literacies, what would you hope their lives look and feel like in the years beyond school, when we sometimes lose track of them, but sometimes we reconnect with them?
Yeah, I've recently had this wave of reconnection with students, which is beautiful. Some, 30 years old or in their mid-20s, which I can't believe I have students of that age. But but I see them as adults and what they're doing, and it's just, man, they are just doing it. Like whatever they're interested in, passionate about, they just go for it. They are trying things. They are confident in their ability to just, and I'm not saying that, being in my 10th grade English class necessarily supported that, but the fact that they reach back out to share what they're doing. And I know that they value that I'm still a part of that community, right? And they're proud to share what they've done. I think my daydream would be that as students leave, if they come through this Eye to Eye mentality, philosophy, approach in their K-12 experience and they leave, that they enter the next phase of their life as curious, kind, reflective individuals. And they do have that multiple literacy in terms of like, yes, sure, they can do the typical literacies, let's say, that are required in school, but they're also able to, like you said, read the world, and they are observant, and their choices are based on that reflection and observation.
Yeah, I have this one student, former student from quite a long time ago. Her name is Marissa, and she and I text each other several times a week, which is a great blessing to me. And I just experienced this moment where she walked away from a 9-to-5 job in Chicago. She's from here, but living in Chicago, and she walked away from that job to take an entrepreneurial step into a business of her own that helps build community in Chicago. And wow, it's just like you see the multiple literacies and the efficacy and everything else kind of on display. And that brings me to, thinking about, well, okay, so this text thread that's been going on for more than 10 years, is actually evidence. It's evidence to me in real time. I'm seeing it. I'm not believing it. I'm actually seeing it happen in front of me, which is where we started this whole thing with efficacy, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, Hey, everybody, stay with us. We will continue our conversation with Dr. Tammy Jones in just a minute.
This is Guy Kawasaki. If you want to learn how to be a remarkable person, please check out my podcast, Remarkable People. I interview people like Roy Yamaguchi, Margaret Atwood, Jane Goodall, Stephen Wolfram, Steven Pinker, Ariana Huffington, and Steve Wozniak. The point of the podcast is to help you become a little bit more remarkable. To learn more, go to remarkablepeople.com. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is the What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, and we are back with Dr. Tammy Jones, who, at the time we recorded this interview, was preparing to do a workshop with the Hanahau'oli Professional Development Center. This workshop addresses two questions: how might we build community in uncertain times and spaces? And how might we, as educators, support one another in doing so? So in this final section, Tammy, I want to give you a chance to do several shout outs. So here we go. So I contend, Tammy, that our charter school law, establishing 25 demonstration charter schools in 1994, helped Hawaii avoid some of the angry confrontations we see between public, private, and charter school sectors on the mainland, meaning the other 49 states. So you have worked at and with two of our charter schools here in Hawaii, Dreamhouse Academy and the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability, known as SEEKS. So you're a scientist. I know that your history as an educator comes through in language and literacy, but you're a scientist in every sense of the word to me. And I'm super interested in the DNA of schools. So what are the primary contributions these two very different but very similar chartered middle schools? What are those contributions? What's their DNA in your perspective?
Wow. Well, at SEEKS, I was on the faculty, on the team, and at Dreamhouse, I'm on the board. So I can speak to them a little differently.
Yeah.
At SEEKS as a faculty member, I was given that freedom. I mentioned earlier, the trust. You're a professional. I remember the day I asked the school leader, I asked Buffy, what am I teaching? And she said, English. I said, yeah, but like what? Because I was ready for that curriculum map, right? That these are the texts you have to teach in this grade. And she was like, whatever you want. And man, my whole world opened up. And it was too big, right? But and I think that's one thing that the charter school, or at least that one, did for me and the other teachers there, is give you that freedom to apply what you know is right, what is right for your students, to be the professional. No one has to look over your shoulder and tell you what to do in that sense of your classroom. And so I think that's one, is creating those types of teachers and putting that trust in them. And then, of course, that's efficacy right away. You're trusted. There's the confidence. You're hired on this team because of the professionalism, what you bring to it. So now go and do it. And that definitely goes right into the classroom. And then students are provided with these authentic learning experiences from a variety of teachers with different backgrounds and strengths. And then as a team, you gain that from one another. When I started, myself and one other English teacher were the English department. But we came to it from very different backgrounds and expectations and experiences, but neither was right or wrong. It was both valued. And so then the students get this range of experiences. And then also, SEEKS valuing, even just in its name, this idea of essential questions, and having students create and explore, their own question, and supporting them along the road, but really getting them to be independent thinkers and learners, and also collaborate on projects, but really pushing them to get to that place of wondering right away.
So before you talk about Dreamhouse, I want to ask you something else about SEEKS. When I talk to people about SEEKS, or if SEEKS comes up in conversations, sometimes it's referred to as the How Might We school. And I wonder, if you can explain exactly what that means. Let's just say that I'm a parent and I have a middle school student. I'm interested in SEEKS, and I'm like, what does a How Might We school kind of look and sound and feel like? What does that mean? What is its DNA?
I haven't heard that before in reference to Sikhs, but hearing it, what stands out to me is the we. It's a team, it's the teacher and the student, it's the whole group. How might we figure this out? How might we explore this question? How might we improve this? And so it just in that framing of it, it is teacher is a co-learner very much. And how might we figure it out?
It sort of links design thinking together, which is, that design prompt approach with the notion of community, that we are going to do this together. I am not going to do it alone. Right.
Yeah. And also instead of let's do this and being more directive, like this is what we're going to do. Now let's do it. It's open, right? How might we do this? And my questions for the workshop start with how might we,
Right.
Which is funny that I haven't heard that before in reference to Sikhs. Maybe it is just in the DNA, it is in that belief of you come to it as a we and open to the answers or the outcomes. It's not just we're going to do this, now let's do it.
Yeah. I did an episode with Buffy Cushman-Pates, who's the school director and the founder, and we really dug deep into the DNA of Sikhs. And though it wasn't referred to as a how might we school in that context, if you listen to that episode, you can just hear it bubbling up. The essence of essential questions is the inquiry part of it, and also the we part of it, that you're going to do it together because, well, that's what inquiry is all about. So that's awesome. And what about Dreamhouse Academy from your perch as a board member?
Yeah, Dreamhouse Eva Beach is focused on leadership for sure. And they definitely do that through inquiry, providing students with similar experiences. I know that the school leader there, Alex Teese, definitely learned a lot from Buffy and from Sikhs. And so there's definitely some similarities there. But they are really pushing students into the spaces, any space to take leadership, anything, like what's an idea that you have? Okay, let's do it. Whatever that is, if it's a fundraiser, if it's changing the school, uniforms, tops, if it's creating a club, like it could be something small. Okay, you want to do it? Go do it. Like pushing them, but with support, to be leaders right from the beginning. As on the board end, I get to hear of all the beautiful things that they're doing. I get to hear about the growth, how they're going to continue to add a grade every year. And it's exciting that next year we'll be jumping into a 9th grade, crossing that bridge into high school.
Wow.
And how the team of teachers really is a team. They're always a we, and they share a very small space, which maybe that is in the nature of charter schools, because Sikhs was the same. You share very small spaces together. But again, it's a we. We're all in this learning environment. We are all going to figure it out. But the emphasis being really on leadership and developing future leaders at Dreamhouse Eva Beach.
And what I love is that not only Dreamhouse and also Sikhs, but really all 37 of our public charter schools here in Hawaii really are, fulfilling the original vision, which was to be demonstration schools to everybody. And each of them brings such unique qualities to the conversation around education. And I'm thinking, that it's likely that your eye to eye as it moves forward will include public and charter and maybe even private school educators, right? Is that kind of your approach?
I'm not limited, that daydream idea. I hope it includes any educators that value the, how might we? I'm just laughing that I started both questions with that. Right. never heard that before. It's so internalized. Who share that same vision, that yes, learning is a social event. It's a collaborative inquiry. It's, community. How do we do that? How do we get there? And then how do we, as adults, create that for one another? Because it is so important, that idea of cohorting that we talked about, it's kind of that idea, making a cohort sort of on the side. I do envision eye to eye not being a one-time, let's say, workshop, with this upcoming one. I did really want to have those two parts for at least some, something beyond just a one-time, okay, good luck, see ya. But there'll be some bring back, and sharing the second time. And I hope that might be a starting point to develop some community spaces. But Ideally, it's not a one-time. Yeah. So I don't know what that means. Is it a program? Is it a PD session? Is it, I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I'm just kind of jumping into ideas. I'm daydreaming, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like at the very core, it's about starting a family and all that entails. And I'm really excited that you're going forward with that. And I'm looking forward to watching that happen over the months and years to come. So Tammy, one last question, and it's really been a blast talking to you today. In the journal Education Perspectives, you wrote, quote, "As Alfie Cohen writes, all of us yearn for a sense of relatedness or belonging, a feeling of being connected to others." So Tammy, in the biographic material you sent me, you noted an influential mentor and your dissertation committee chair, Dr. Anne Fries, someone you clearly have a strong connection to. So who is she, and what gifts do you carry in your Good Thinkers toolkit that come from her?
Wow. I miss Anne. I haven't talked with her in a bit, and she is such an amazing mentor and influence on me. Anne I met early on in my master's program out here and asked her to guide me and be on my committee for my master's thesis. And then I was honored that she opted to be my director for my graduate program again in my doctoral studies, and I asked her to be my chair. She opened my eyes to the power of storytelling as a valid form, an extremely valid form of research, that I didn't have to just restate what other people have said. I didn't have to read and research and put together all these, valid, quote unquote, or longstanding theories to support what I was doing, to say, see, they said it first and this is what I'm doing. But rather, I could tell my own story and I could provide the value to that in that story. Was completely blown away when she encouraged me to do a self-study as my doctoral research.
Wow.
And in support, she definitely understands and valued philosophy for children. And she knew that was definitely who I am as an educator. And she respected Dr. Thomas Jackson and all the work he's done over the years with P4C. And so she encouraged, do that and tell the story of that and get that feedback from your students. And that is a valid contribution to, the research. So I carried that with me, that storytelling is not just to pass the time or to share an experience. It really is an insight, valuable way of doing, research, sharing research. And yeah, I guess self-reflection, how important that is. And not just keeping it to yourself, but sharing it beyond the self to give insight. Yeah.
Wow, what a gift she gave you, Tammy. Right? I mean, just the gift of liberation from the canon and the usual way of doing things. Let's, just saying to you, let's have you tell your story, and let's have you construct it yourself, right? Wow, that's so awesome. What a nice thing. And to be able to look back on that. Yeah.
She definitely wanted me to ground it in, the research, but I was just as valid. My experience was just as valid as, that Alfie Cohen quote or John Dewey or, whoever I was putting in there. And that was also, they were also guides, this resonates with me. That's what I want for my students. But putting the value on me as the educator, again, as the professional to tell the stories was huge.
Yeah, my master's thesis advisor was Dr. Marianne Raywood, who sadly passed on a few years ago, but I had a similar relationship with her and experienced similar gifts from her, the gift of, and my master's was written about service learning, which was sort of a passion for me at that time and has continued to be, but the ways that she helped coach and guide and give me the freedom to think it through in the ways that were unique to me were very special. So I really understand what you're saying about Dr. Anne Fries. That's a great shout out. Thank you for that. So Dr. Tammy Jones, thank you for spending this time with us today. I hope you and your loved ones remain safe and in good health. Thank you for all you do to bring the joy of learning to our children here in Hawaii.
Thanks so much, Josh. This was great. This was fun, and you definitely pushed me to reflect a lot as well during it. So I appreciate you.
That's great. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
My editor, creative consultant, and sound engineer is the talented Evan Kurohara. Our theme music comes from the vast catalog of music created by my friend of 40 years, the remarkable pianist Michael Sloan. Producer of 12 albums with over 100 songs, Michael Sloan is featured in Apple Music, Spotify, and all the other major music platforms. You can also find his work at his YouTube channel. Michael has listeners in over 100 countries and over 2,000 cities to date. Support these episodes with remarkable, innovative, and imaginative educators and education leaders by giving us your own rating and writing us a review at your favorite podcast store. This series is funded by education change agent Ted Dintersmith, executive producer of the acclaimed documentary film Most Likely to Succeed, and author of the best-selling book What School Could Be. Please join the What School Could Be virtual community by going to community.whatschoolcouldbe.org or by downloading the What School Could Be app from your favorite app store. The What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast is brought to you by Josh Rapoon Productions. Send your feedback to mltsinhawaii@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at mltsinhawaii and at Josh Rapoon. Finally, please like our Most Likely to Succeed in Hawaii Facebook page and YouTube channel. Friends, even as COVID infection numbers decline, stay safe and please get vaccinated. Most of all, bring kindness and compassion into the world. We need a surplus of both right now. Until the next episode, ahui ho and take care.